I bought my family's multimillion-dollar business for less than a used car after my stepbrother ran it into the ground. But that wasn't even the best part. Yeah, that's how I'd start if this were some puff piece in a finance magazine. But this is Reddit. So here's the unvarnished version. I'm Liam, 38, architect by trade, grudge holder by blood. Some people work out their trauma with therapy. I prefer spreadsheets and slow-burn revenge. This isn't a story about getting even. It's about taking everything from someone who thought I was too soft to fight back. Let me rewind. My old man died 2.5 years ago. Heart attack. Dropped dead in the middle of a boardroom presentation, pitching some soulless expansion plan for the family business Briggs & Sons Construction. He was Briggs. I was the Sons. Except that somewhere along the way that S got silent. My dad remarried when I was 18. Enter Ethan, my stepbrother. If Gordon Gekko and a used car salesman had a baby, it'd be Ethan. Slicked back hair, $1,000 suits, fake charm thicker than his cologne. The kind of guy who always knew how to twist a situation just enough to make you doubt your instincts. I didn't hate Ethan growing up. We weren't close, but we weren't enemies. Not until he figured out my dad would always pick business over blood. See, I'm not like them. I'm an architect. I build things that last. Actual things. Dad wanted me in the family firm, overseeing blueprints or managing sites. But I saw how he ran things. Cut corners, greased palms, kept inspectors happy with more whiskey than oversight. It wasn't my style. I walked away. No hard feelings. At least until the funeral. That's when I found out my name wasn't even in the will. I mean, not for anything that mattered. Ethan got everything, the business, the estate, the cars, the accounts. I got my mom's old locket. It wasn't even her favorite one. I didn't even find out from the lawyer. Ethan told me himself, wearing that smug smile like it was tailored. Look, Liam, Dad knew you weren't cut out for this. You've got your own thing going, drawing houses or whatever. I'm the one keeping the family legacy alive. Drawing houses, like I was scribbling stick figures in the dirt. Guess I'm just the son's part in name only, huh? I shot back. Don't take it personally, Ethan said, clapping me on the shoulder like we were buddies. Dad wanted the business to stay in the family. I didn't say what I was thinking, that if I'd been adopted, I'd have a stronger claim than Ethan, whose contribution to the company was mostly playing golf with clients and charming investors out of their pensions. I left that meeting numb. Angry, sure, but more than that, humiliated. Cut out of my own bloodline like I was a distant cousin. But here's the thing about me. I don't do knee-jerk. I don't blow up and burn bridges. I watch. I wait. I plan. And while Ethan thought I'd slink back to my blueprints and lick my wounds, I started thinking about the one thing he never expected. I was going to take everything back. But I wasn't going to do it by begging for my share or fighting him in court. No, Ethan was going to hand me the keys himself without even knowing it. This was the opening move. So, yeah, Ethan inherited everything. The family business, the estate, the cars, the accounts. Hell, I think the smug bastard even got my dad's favorite recliner. I got a pat on the back and my mom's locket. But I wasn't about to start swinging wildly. That's not my style. Ethan? He thought he'd won the whole damn game. He figured I'd crawl back to my little life drafting blueprints and let him ride off with the family legacy. But I know something about buildings and people like Ethan. Doesn't matter how shiny the outside looks. If the foundation's cracked, the whole thing can be brought down with the right pressure. So I started where any good architect would, with research. First, I did what Ethan never thought I'd do. I paid attention. I started attending local construction expos. I kept my ear to the ground with suppliers, contractors, inspectors. Turns out, the old man had taught Ethan just enough about running the business to make him dangerous to himself. Ethan didn't actually know anything about construction. He knew about deals, playing golf with developers, making promises to investors that would take a miracle or illegal labor to keep. In short, he was all hat, no cattle. But me, I had time. I kept my day job, of course. Didn't want to tip him off. But I made it a habit to visit the bars where contractors and city inspectors drank. I bought beers. I listened. Turns out, Ethan was pissing off the exact people he needed to keep sweet. Cutting corners, delaying payments, skipping safety protocols to pad the books. One guy, a former project manager for Briggs & Sons, let it slip over whiskey that Ethan had been floating the business on short-term high-interest loans since Dad passed. Overleveraged like crazy. Said he was expanding too fast. Trying to impress out-of-state investors with promises the company couldn't keep. Bingo. Ethan wasn't sitting on a gold mine. He was sitting on a time bomb. That's when I started laying the groundwork. I reached out to a guy I'd met back in my university days, Andrew, finance whiz, but the kind of quiet guy you trust with your life. Together, we started setting up a couple shell companies. Real discreet. No connections to my name, nothing that would ever tie back to me. Why? Because I started buying debt. Ethan's debt. Briggs & Sons owed a lot of people money. Suppliers, subcontractors, private lenders. You'd be surprised how cheap you can buy debt from nervous lenders when you've got a smile, some cash, and an anonymous LLC. I wasn't just going after the business. I was going after the walls holding it up. But I wasn't done. I hired a PI, old school, trench coat, the whole 9 yards. Told him I wanted everything on Ethan. His personal finances, offshore accounts, habits. Didn't matter how small. Because I knew Ethan's Achilles heel. His greed. The best part? Ethan still thought I was licking my wounds. Last I heard, he was throwing a party for some developers from Miami. Talking about breaking ground on a new luxury high-rise project. I kept working. I kept buying. I kept digging. And by the time Ethan realized someone was tightening the noose, it was going to be too late. Next move? I make him bleed. By now, I was a couple months deep into my little project. Ethan? He was busy giving TED Talk level speeches at networking events about legacy leadership and ethical growth strategies. I know because I watched one of those speeches. Twice. Couldn't decide if it was funnier the first or second time. The man had the gall to wear my dad's cufflinks and talk about integrity. I couldn't make this stuff up. But here's where things get interesting. Ethan was overleveraged to hell. Taking out loans to pay off other loans. Stacking promises on promises. The old rob Peter to pay Paul routine. Only now, I was Peter. With Andrew's help, I owned roughly 40% of his outstanding debt through 3 different LLCs. At this point, I could have probably called in a few payments, made him squirm a little. But no, that wasn't the plan. See, if you push too hard too fast, snakes just slither away. I wanted him starved, not spooked. So instead, I started turning the screws in places he wouldn't notice right away. Ever heard of the term liens? If not, let me break it down. It's basically a way for creditors to claim a piece of the action if someone owes them money. And Ethan? He owed money to everyone. I started filing liens on his projects through those LLCs. Slowly, quietly, just enough to make his suppliers nervous. And nervous suppliers? They stop extending credit. They start asking for cash up front. Now, Ethan's business model? It depended on floating payments. Paying contractors late to keep cash flow going. When the suppliers clamped down, his costs went up. Deadlines slipped. Penalties kicked in. Clients started breathing down his neck. Meanwhile, the PI kept feeding me little gems. Turns out Ethan had a few personal skeletons. Offshore accounts in Belize. Classic. Gambling debts. Predictable. And the best one. He was funneling company money to fund a condo in Aspen for his side piece. Real original. I filed that one away for later. Oh, and remember that luxury high-rise project he was bragging about? That was the cherry on top. He'd signed a contract with investors promising construction would start by Q3. But with suppliers squeezing him and permits delayed because I quietly incentivized a few local inspectors to take their sweet time. Small world. The construction biz. That project was going nowhere fast. At this point, I wasn't just bleeding him. I was watching him bleed. You could see it in his press releases. Talk about strategic realignments and temporary cash flow challenges. Classic corporate speak for, I'm circling the drain. But Ethan still had no idea who was behind it. I was patient. I kept showing up at family gatherings, playing the quiet, sideline brother. Got to watch him squirm as he tried to convince everyone the business was booming. The kicker? He invited me to lunch. Wanted to bury the hatchet. Said there was a big opportunity coming up. Needed someone with my architectural background to consult. Imagine that. Asking me to help him save the business. I smiled, nodded, told him I'd think about it. The only thing I was thinking about was how soon I'd pull the rug out from under him. Next move? I tipped the scales. Ethan wasn't sweating yet. Not fully. He still thought he could talk or schmooze his way out of anything. That lunch we had? He treated me like I was some junior employee he could mentor. Laid out his vision for expanding Briggs & Sons into premium markets. I nodded along, chewing on a steak I didn't even want. But I noticed the cracks. The Rolex he always flashed? Replaced with a cheaper Omega. The tailor-fitted suit? Not as crisp as it used to be. Little things. But I was raised by a man who taught me to read a room. Ethan's world was shrinking whether he admitted it or not. See, that's the thing about guys like him, they're built on perception. They need people to believe they're bulletproof. Once that illusion shatters, the fall is fast. And I was getting ready to give him that push. I made my next move through Andrew. We identified Ethan's largest creditor outside of the ones I'd already bought. A private investment group that fronted him serious cash for that high-rise project, the one stuck in permitting hell because of my creative influence. Andrew set up a meeting. As far as this group knew, I was just the managing director of one of the LLCs holding a chunk of Ethan's debt, which I was. They had no idea I was his brother. We sat across from each other in the sleek office, leather chairs, skyline views, the works. They didn't even blink when I laid out my offer. Buy out their entire loan at a loss. They pushed back, of course. But I knew the truth, they'd already written off the high-rise. Ethan had missed 2 milestone payments. The permit delays? A nightmare. His cash flow? Dried up. The lender was ready to cut their losses. I made sure they liked me. Made it sound like I was swooping in to salvage the mess. They agreed. And just like that, I owned 60% of Ethan's debt. Quietly. Invisibly. Yeah? Ethan owed me, he just didn't know it yet. I let him twist for another few months. Watched as the late fees stacked up. Watched as the suppliers, now emboldened by my liens, refused to unload materials without cash on delivery. Watched as one project after another stalled out. Clients walked. Investors grew cold. I wanted him desperate before I made my move. And then it came. Ethan sent me a text totally out of the blue. Hey man, random question, do you know anyone who'd be interested in short-term investing? Big project, solid returns? Could cut you in two if you're interested. I almost choked on my coffee. The king of the castle asking me for help? But I played it cool. Told him I'd ask around. Meanwhile, I called Andrew. It's time. I called the notes due. In layman's terms, I demanded full repayment of the loans I owned, the ones keeping his sorry excuse for a business afloat. With interest. Immediately. And Ethan? He couldn't cover a third of it. The wolf wasn't at his door anymore. It was inside. Ethan didn't respond right away when I called in the debts. Probably took him a few hours to figure out where the letters were even coming from. I could almost picture it, the growing panic as he shuffled through the legal jargon, seeing company names he didn't recognize, realizing that somehow someone had him by the throat. Then came the text. Hey, this debt notice looks like it's coming from one of your clients? Some LLC called Redwood Holdings? Can you look into that for me? Redwood Holdings. That was one of my shells. I laughed so hard I almost dropped my phone. Here's Ethan asking me to investigate myself. But I played it straight. Yeah, I'll see what I can find out. Oh, I found out all right. Within 2 weeks, Ethan was on the phone with me, voice tight but still trying to act like we were just two brothers casually talking shop. Listen, Liam, things are getting weird over here. Some of my creditors are acting skittish. You wouldn't happen to know what's going on, would you? Would I? I let a beat hang in the air, then hit him with the softest of jabs. I mean, Ethan, from what I hear, the market's tightening. Maybe people are nervous about your books. Silence. A crack. Just a small one. But enough. I knew the books were a mess. I had the real numbers from my PI's deep dive. Ethan had been moving cash between accounts, cooking invoices, even delaying payroll for his staff. He borrowed against assets he no longer technically owned. The Aspen condo? Mortgaged to the hilt. His wife didn't even know about the gambling debts. Now here's where the cruelty comes in. See, I could have gone for the kill right there. Forced him into bankruptcy, exposed the whole rotten empire. But that's too easy. Too quick. No, I wanted him to sweat. To scramble. To beg. So I offered him a lifeline. Look, Ethan, maybe I can help. I know some people. Maybe I can negotiate with Redwood Holdings for you. Silence. Then the tiniest sliver of hope crept into his voice. Yeah? You do that. I kept my tone casual, like I wasn't savoring every second. Sure. Family and all. Here's what I really did. I called a meeting with Ethan and my contacts at Redwood Holdings. Andrew played the part of the representative. Poker face solid. We laid out the terms. Ethan could restructure his debt at an increased interest rate. Oh, and collateral? We wanted everything, the business, the estate, even his personal holdings. Ethan balked, of course. Postured. Swore he'd find another way. Said he had investors lined up. Spoiler, he didn't. By the end of the month, 2 more of his projects defaulted. His investors started backing out. His bank accounts? Nearly empty. And Ethan? He came crawling back, asking if Redwood Holdings would please reconsider. I made him sign the deal in my office. Sat across from him. Watched him sweat through his overpriced blazer. He still didn't know who owned Redwood. But now I owned him. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Next step? Tear down his world. Publicly. Ethan looked like a man trying to sell confidence he didn't own anymore. When he signed over the collateral, his shares in Briggs & Sons, the estate, the condo in Aspen, I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But then I remembered the way he smiled at Dad's funeral like it was a board meeting. How he cut me out of the will and called it just business. Yeah, almost. But I wasn't here to just own Ethan. I wanted to erase him. Owning the debt? That was just paperwork. I needed everyone to know exactly who Ethan Briggs was when the lights came on, what a fraud he really was. Because there's something about watching a man lose everything in public. It hits different. So I started with his investors. One by one, I leaked specific details about Briggs & Sons' financial instability. No headlines. No big expose yet. Just a whisper campaign. The gambling debts. The offshore accounts. The missed payments. His investors scattered faster than roaches under kitchen lights. The high-rise project? Dead in the water. His suppliers? I nudged a few of them, reminded them liens were still active, payments still overdue. Within a month, Ethan's credit line vanished. And then came the media. I fed a reporter everything, every misstep, every forged invoice, every shady backroom deal Ethan had ever made. Nothing illegal enough to land him in jail yet, but enough to shred his reputation. The headline? Legacy crumbles inside the financial collapse of Briggs & Sons construction. Front page. His face. Dad's name, our name, dragged through the mud Ethan had built his empire on. And the best part? The article named Redwood Holdings as the primary creditor, the company that rescued what was left. Still no clue it was me. I waited for the call. It came at 2:13 a.m. Ethan's voice was shredded like he'd been screaming or crying or both. Liam, I don't know what to do. I'm ruined. Everything's gone. You were right. I should have listened to you. Please, help me fix this. He didn't even sound like himself. Gone was the slick businessman. This was just a desperate man trying to hold onto anything. And me? I smiled, took a deep breath, then gave him the coup de grace. I am Redwood Holdings, Ethan. Silence, just his breathing on the other end of the line. Then, like the final nail in the coffin, I added, You signed it all over to me. I wish I could describe the sound he made. Some mix between a gasp and a sob. I let it hang there. Let him feel it. Let him know that the brother he cut out, the one he thought was too soft, too small to matter, that brother owned everything now. The family business? Mine. The estate? Mine. Even that Aspen condo he hid from his wife? Yep, mine too. I wasn't going to keep any of it. But that wasn't the point. The point was taking. Next move? Leave him with nothing. The thing about revenge is it's not just about taking what's theirs. It's about leaving them with less than nothing. Ethan knew in that moment that he'd lost everything, but I wasn't done. No, not yet. I gave him a week. A week to sit with the knowledge that I'd been the wolf at his door this whole time. That every phone call, every favor he'd asked, every plea for help went straight to me. The brother he cut out like I was a bad investment. I pictured him pacing that big empty estate, checking his phone for a miracle that wasn't coming. Then I hit him where it really hurt. The auction notice. Yeah. The family estate? The one he held over my head like a trophy? It was going up for public auction. I hired an outside firm to handle it, kept my name out of it, but made damn sure the listing made it into every local business journal and luxury real estate magazine. Headline: Historic Briggs Estate up for auction, owner seeks quick sale amid financial turmoil. Ouch. Within 48 hours, his wife called me. Didn't even realize I owned it now. She begged for more time. Said they could refinance, find a way to buy it back. I was polite. Sympathetic even. I'm afraid that's not possible, I told her. Ethan didn't call. But he showed up. Unannounced. On my doorstep. Hair unkempt, suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it, probably had. He didn't even knock right away, just stood there. I let him wait. Finally, I opened the door. You can't do this, Liam. His voice cracked, that cocky edge gone. The big brother routine? Gone. This was a broken man standing in front of me. But I wasn't here for apologies. I wasn't here for brotherly love. I already did. I let him step inside because, hey, I'm a hospitable guy. Offered him coffee. He refused, sat on my couch like it was a throne he'd been dethroned from. Tried one last Hail Mary. We're family. This isn't what Dad would have wanted. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. You remember when Dad died? How you cut me out. How you told me the business was too complicated for me. That I wasn't family enough to run it. He looked away. I pressed on. You thought I'd just go back to my little life, drawing houses and playing nice. But I was patient, Ethan. I let you build the castle on sand. I let you stack debt on debt until it crushed you. I didn't take this from you. You handed it to me. I stood, walked to the door, held it open. You can leave now. He shuffled out, shoulders hunched like he'd aged 20 years in 20 minutes. That auction? It went off without a hitch. Estate sold. The Aspen condo? Listed. Everything that had Ethan's fingerprints on it? Wiped clean. But I wasn't keeping any of it. The Briggs estate? Sold to a preservation trust. The business? Dismantled, sold off to smaller contractors who actually cared about their workers. I made sure Ethan knew every penny I made went toward the people he'd screwed over, former employees, subcontractors, suppliers he stiffed. And Ethan? He was homeless. Filed bankruptcy. His wife left him, took what little she could salvage. Last I heard, he was working nights at a warehouse 2 towns over. But I wasn't done yet. One final move. You'd think bankruptcy, public humiliation, losing the house, the company, the condo, all of it would have been enough. But no. This story needed closure. Not for me. For everyone Ethan had burned along the way. I wasn't just settling a personal score. I was writing the last chapter of a story Ethan started the day he smiled at my father's funeral and made sure the ink on that will cut me out clean. And trust me, this last chapter? It's what makes the whole thing stick in the throat. See, Ethan still had one thing left. His name. No matter how broke he was, no matter how many nights he spent folding boxes at that warehouse, he could still cling to the idea that he was Ethan Briggs. Legacy man. Big shot. The face of Briggs & Sons Construction, even if the company was dust. I couldn't let him keep that. So here's what I did. After the auction, after the company liquidation, I took the Briggs name, filed paperwork to retain the brand for myself. Not the company. Just the name. It cost me pennies, honestly. Ethan's bankruptcy filings meant he couldn't even contest it. And then, I rebranded. Turned Briggs & Sons into a nonprofit that offered low-cost architectural services and construction consulting to struggling veterans and blue-collar workers. Helped guys like the ones Ethan screwed over, guys who'd built his projects, who got laid off without severance, who had families to feed. I plastered the Briggs name everywhere. New website, press releases, local news segments. But here's the kicker. I ran an ad campaign in every local paper, big bold letters. The new Briggs legacy, serving those who build our communities. Ethan couldn't even escape his own last name without seeing what I'd done to it. I heard he lost a few temp jobs after that. Employers Googled him, found the scandal, saw the new Briggs nonprofit, and figured he was the fraud. Which of course he was. But here's the truly cruel part, the one that still makes me smile. I wrote him a letter. Simple. Plain white envelope. No return address. Inside? This is what family does. That was it. No signature. No threats. Just a reminder that family doesn't always forget. Months later, I heard through the grapevine that Ethan left town. Last spotted couch surfing, trying to get odd jobs under a different name. The man who once held the keys to a multi-million-dollar company? Toasted. Utterly. And me? I moved on. Kept the nonprofit running. Built a name that meant something. Not for me, but for the people Ethan left behind. I don't miss the old house. I don't miss the company. Hell, I don't even think about Ethan much anymore. But every so often I'll get an email from a contractor or a veteran we've helped through the new Briggs organization. Just a thanks. Just a reminder that something good came from all of this. And when I see the Briggs name on that email signature, I remember one thing. It's mine now. It's a funny thing, carrying a name. Growing up, Briggs felt like both a burden and a badge. Dad made sure we knew what it stood for: hard work, reputation, doing whatever it took to win. I carried that weight differently. I thought the name could be more than just power plays and backroom deals. I thought maybe it could mean building something that lasts. Ethan? He treated the name like a credit card with no limit. By now, the man had burned through every bit of capital, financial, social, emotional. But the name? That was still hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. And I wasn't about to let that be the final word. That's why I poured myself into rebuilding what Ethan had broken, not for profit, not for headlines, but because I didn't want Briggs to be the punchline to a cautionary tale. I wanted to turn it into something solid, tangible. I hired some of the best people Ethan had laid off: site managers, foremen, architects who still had their integrity intact. Brought them in, paid them fair, gave them ownership stakes. This wasn't about me sitting at the top. This was about putting the name to work for people who actually built things. The nonprofit grew faster than I expected. Local projects turned into regional partnerships. Veterans housing initiatives. Community centers. We weren't building skyscrapers, but we were building roots. Every so often I'd get word about Ethan. Someone would drop a rumor at a bar, or an old supplier would mention seeing him. He was moving from job to job, name to name. Rumor had it he was calling himself Ethan Daniels at one point, working as a freelance consultant, trying to scrape together something resembling his old life. But names follow you. And his was wreckage. I kept the pressure off, let him drift. Sometimes the best revenge is letting someone live in the mess they made. No resets. No clean slates. But one thing I didn't expect? The apology letter. It showed up about a year after the dust settled. No return address, scrawled handwriting that looked like it hadn't touched pen to paper in months. Inside, You were right. I ruined everything. I didn't know how to stop. I was scared you'd take it all, and you did. But maybe you should've. Maybe you were the only one who knew how. No grand gestures. No pleas for forgiveness. Just a broken man admitting, in the quietest way possible, that he'd lost the fight. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry anymore, but because some stories don't need to be reopened. That letter sits in my desk drawer. I haven't read it again. I don't need to. But it's there. Like a trophy, I guess. The final proof that Ethan Briggs, the man who thought he could bury me under my own family name, ended up buried by it himself. One more piece left to tell. I kept Ethan's letter tucked away, not because I needed a reminder of what I did, but because sometimes closure looks like a piece of paper, creases worn, ink faded, written by a man who finally saw the ruin of his own making. But the story? It wasn't about him anymore. It was about me and what I built after burning his kingdom to the ground. The Briggs Foundation, as people came to call it, grew into something real. What started as a small operation, just me, a few old contractors, and some goodwill, turned into a movement. Veterans needing housing? We built it. Communities gutted by bad developers like Ethan? We rebuilt them better this time. No more corner cutting. No more handshake deals behind closed doors. And the best part? The Briggs name became something people trusted again. I still remember the first time I overheard someone at a supply yard saying, "If Briggs is handling it, you know it'll get done right." That meant more to me than owning any estate, any business empire. But if I'm honest, sometimes late at night, when the calls stopped and the crews clocked out, I'd catch myself wondering where Ethan ended up. Whether he ever landed back on his feet. Whether he'd ever really learned. Then one day, a buddy of mine, contractor I work with out of state, shot me a text. "Dude, didn't you have a brother named Ethan? Just saw him working nights at this warehouse in Reno." Reno. Not exactly the lap of luxury. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. That chapter was closed. But here's what I did do. I drove out there once. Call it curiosity. Call it a final check-in. I sat in my truck across from a dingy loading dock, watched as workers filtered out after a graveyard shift. And sure enough, there he was. Ethan. Wearing a reflective vest 2 sizes too big, shuffling toward a busted old car that probably wouldn't make it another winter. No suit. No cufflinks. Just a man who looked like he'd been ground down to dust. He didn't see me. I didn't want him to. I sat there for a while, thinking about everything that led here. About Dad. About the company. About how easily Ethan could have shared it all and how greed burned it down instead. And then I drove home. I didn't need to rub it in. His life was the reminder. The Briggs name? It lives on now, not as an empire, but as a foundation. A legacy rebuilt from the ashes. Ethan? He's just a man with a past he can't outrun. Me? I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Building something that lasts. And that's the best revenge of all.